Hello everyone and welcome back to the Creative Nomaland podcast. On this episode, I'm joined by visual artist Daniel Lopez, who works across multiple disciplines from ceramics to watercolour. Born in Andalusia in Spain, Daniel grew up surrounded by art and creativity as he watched his mother study to become a professional printer. It was here that Daniel began his own journey of experimenting and mastering multiple disciplines, and he went on to study in both Spain and Cuba to develop his own creative practice and his own creative language. After 8 years of focused study and hard work, Daniel reached a pivotal moment. His work was already being shown in museums and galleries and being bought by private collectors. And the offer to study under one of Spain's top ceramicists was on the table. But Daniel decides on a different direction and makes the brave decision to move to England to learn English. This leads to 3 years away from his art practice and having to essentially start his art career again in a country that doesn't know him as an artist. Now based in Birmingham, Daniel talks about the process of starting again and being dedicated to the art. He highlights the importance of being brave and adaptable and routinely leaving our comfort zones in order for us to discover new things, to develop our skills, push the limits and break the rules, but most importantly, to play consciously and find beauty in the process. You can check out all of Daniel's work via the links in the show notes while you're listening to the podcast, of course. Daniel's story is super inspiring and I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed talking to him. So, let's get into it. Dude, thanks for doing this. First of all, can you introduce yourself? Tell everyone who you are and where people can check out your work, first and foremost.
Well, thank you for coming to the studio and for this recording. I'm Daniel Lopez, visual artist, painter. I do ceramics, I do all sorts of things really. It depends on the project I'm working with. I will go with one media or another, and I will explain why I do that. Everyone can see my work in Instagram, and through Instagram you can go into my website and check different projects and what my work is about. I'm Spanish originally. I was born in Andalusia, but then when I was a teenager, I moved to Cuenca, which is near Madrid.
Okay,
Valencia.
right. I'm going to stop you there, mate, because we're going to get onto all of this lovely stuff. But now you're based in Birmingham, right?
Yes, I am.
So originally a multimedia artist, originally from Andalusia, now based in Birmingham. How does that happen? So I want to go backwards. I know your mum taught art. Have you always been creative? Have you always known that you wanted to be an artist? How did we develop this creative language that has found you move to, well, we'll get to how you moved to Birmingham, but was that creative language always there is my question.
I wouldn't say that the language was always there, but I was always practicing art. When I was born, my mom was very young and she was studying in the School of Art at the time. So I spent my evenings in the School of Art with her and with the teachers, and I was just like the kid running around every workshop. And then I was very lucky that when I grew up a little bit more and we had our own space, we always had a studio in the house that I was free to go to and to play around. So the language, what I consider language is something more personal that you develop, but I was always playing around, and that's where you
what was your creative language as a kid? I know you said you're always playing around, but what
I do now, creating my own paints and stuff, I was doing that when I was 7. Because I had pigments, I had the freedom to go into our workshop and play around. Carefully, obviously, she told me, don't touch the acids, and because she's a printer. So she was working with dangerous materials, but I had my section where I could use anything. So my interest then was from making my own guitar as a toy to be painting and creating, just
playing.
That was I think that's the best environment for creativity. to be allowed to play with anything and not to be told. Normally, kids are told to go to painting lessons and things like that. And the approach is you need to paint like this or focus on that. I did that in the School of Art, and that's the education, the traditional education that you get as a training as an artist.
But as a child,
I was just in a playground.
But to already have that influence of your mother being a student of art.
She started as a student, and then she became a professional printer, working in different workshops in Madrid, and having that space was just incredible for me, an incredible opportunity that I didn't have any pressure to do anything. I just did it because I wanted. She just put the ground there, and I played.
So at that point, you're not thinking more long term. You're still just going, this is just
obviously you're
what I do for pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. No pressure at all from anyone. It's just...
So can you talk a bit more about growing up in Andalusia and then moving to Cuenca, which is presumably was quite an influential moment?
Yeah, I was becoming a teenager. I was 12 to 13 when I moved to Cuenca. And before, in Úbeda, it's a small town with commerce and very endemic culture, I would say, in a way.
What triggered the move to Cuenca?
My mom got a job as a teacher. To see the whole picture, you need to know my family was a very humble family, working class, and we were struggling quite a lot when I was born. And before that, because my grandma got divorced, my granddad was an alcoholic. And there were 5 kids, one of them my mom, that was really young, 15 when I was born. So we were 3 generations in the same house. And everyone had to start to work. And so my mom was studying, but she was working evenings and working in a burger shop to bring money for everyone, because my grandma couldn't cope with all of that. So everyone had to chip in. And the 2 little ones, me and my uncle, that grew up together like siblings, and we treat each other like siblings. He's my brother. And the other ones as well, but the closest relationship is with him.
Were the rest of the family, I mean, I know you're all in close quarters, but were the rest of the family creative?
It was solely my mom, really, the one that... And then my uncle is an architect as well. So we both were very lucky because we had the opportunity to go to university.
Okay, so you've got the influence of your mum and that art scene and the ability to just play, which is fantastic. Did anything change in your practice when you went to Cuenca? I know Cuenca,
I was a child, so I carry on, and I became a teenager, and at that point, I always play around, and I had various projects, creative. It's a bit weird for teenager that age to carry on doing these sort of things when it's more discovering. And
you say the older
more time,
the older children get, the less people are willing to put their hand up to volunteer to say draw a picture on a drawing board,
but I always had that environment at home and my own space as well to create. And soon when I moved to Cuenca, it was a struggle. Obviously I left. The rest of my family was in Úbeda. Me and my mom went, just us, to a new city. A lot colder, a lot darker, a lot. Andalusia is bright, it's social, everything is on the street, and happiness in a way that everything just happens a lot more fluid. And Cuenca is more introverted.
Why is that?
Province. I think it's cultural, and culture is always related to the location and the environment. It's up in the mountains, it's more enclosed, more endogamic, and I don't know, it just happened to be. And I don't know why that influencing people's attitudes and behaviors and
would you say being new to a city and just you and your mum there, did that make you more introvert to spend more time, or allow you to spend more time creating because it was just an easy?
Not necessarily. At the time I got a bit depressed and stuff. I miss my grandma, which is like my mom. It was a struggle, but I was very grateful to have the opportunity. Afterwards, you realize that it's a great opportunity to be able to change and to move on from that comfort space that is your town. That always opens your eyes. I discovered another thing, another way of life. You don't realize.
Can you elaborate more? What did you discover in Cuenca that you perhaps?
Well, everything is just another environment. Everything that at that moment is your life, your friends, your school, your everything just changes. So you discover another way of seeing things because everything has changed around you. And to be forced to adapt to another environment makes you grow and see other options.
So apart from your mother as a major influence, were there any people influencing your sort of the work that you were creating as a teenager? I'm guessing you still are now.
See, obviously that there's always an influence, whether it's conscious or not. It's what you are supposed to. When you're creating something, you don't create never from zero. You create from everything that is in the back of your mind.
Yeah, product of your influence.
It's just, picking from here and there and putting together, and you get ideas from places that you don't even know.
So at this age, what is the work that you're creating that's exciting you? And as I say, is there a moment where you go, right, I want to do this full time?
So after secondary school, I went to the School of Art. It's creative, but it's not creative. It was more training. I was very interested in learning techniques, in learning to draw. Everything that I didn't have the pressure when I was a kid, but I was developing anyway because I was practicing different things. Also the things like my mom has got still some abstract paintings from when I was 7.
That's amazing.
That now I look back and it's quite incredible what I was doing there because I was playing. It's the same thing that I'm playing around now with the...
And do you know where that I mean, I know it's easy to look back in hindsight at work and go, oh wow, I've taken that forward now. But at that moment, what were the influences at art school, or was it just a case of...
It was just an option. It was just something that I could do because I had the materials, and probably I've seen some exhibition that was sort of like that, or in a book, in a catalogue. I don't know. It just happened to be that I did it. I remember taking some different mixes of pigments that my mom had and adding sugar, adding sand, adding PVA. So I did my own acrylic with loads of materials and start painting and see what happened. And now I do that stuff as well.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
I started there, and I don't... Probably something I must have seen at that age.
Yeah, I mean, our influences a lot of the time are unconscious, aren't they? And we don't know them. But I think that's interesting. So you're at the School of Art in Cuenca, and you're sort of...
I'm going back. In the School of Art, I'm going back in a sense of
you've done finding
DVD.
Yeah.
The nature of a School of Art is also that. But you are allowed to experiment, but the approach from education is normally to cut off your creativity. That's normally what happened.
Yeah.
With your education into a point that cuts off many other options. And what you need to be creative is to have all the options.
Mm. So, but you've experienced that as a child, having all that freedom, which is fantastic. And then you've almost gone back to the School of Art to sort of refine it, to go, oh, perhaps I need a little bit more technique, refine the practice, to be able to break the rules again.
And I must say, most of my technical refinement wasn't even in the School of Art. It's a practice that you develop. I just spend most of my evenings working at home, painting, drawing, spending my time to develop. I studied watercolour at that point, more or less.
Okay.
And then I put it aside. Watercolour is a discipline that is super difficult because you cannot make many mistakes. It's not forgiving. You need to preserve the white from the paper. I discovered that discipline, for instance, was in the School of Art. And I had scholarships to go to different professional watercolorists that came to the city to teach.
So the focus was really on developing practice in a...
Absolutely.
So how long were you at the School of Art in Cuenca?
That was only 2 years, and then I studied university. I went to university. I carried on in Cuenca. I had the luck that one of, if not the most interesting universities of art in Spain. It was already in the city that I was living.
What made the University of Cuenca so
different? It was it's not new. It's like 30 or 30-something years old, but that's very new for a university. And the fact that made it really special, particularly in the beginning, is that this project wasn't set like a normal university with doctors and teachers. It wasn't teachers. There were professional artists that came to the city to teach art practices, not a teacher of someone that has been teaching how to draw, but they never did it professionally.
And it makes a big difference, right?
It makes a super big difference, because at the end of the day, I think universities that open your mind. There's not one way of painting. There's not. The basics, the technical aspect of it can be a basic, but then you have to develop that personally. And I think university is there to make you question every step that you are making. Is to open more your mind and put you in the wall, in the outside wall, ready to do what you want to do, what you have to do, to develop your project, to learn how to develop a personal project.
I mean, you had practicing artists. Are there any artists in particular that stood out to you at that time who came in and you were like, wow, there's some real influence?
Absolutely, every day.
Wow.
Every day. We had really interesting people teaching there.
So what's I'm trying to work out the timeline now. Your university now at the University of Cuenca. It's a prestigious art school in Spain. But then obviously you know where I'm trying to go with this. How on earth? Because there's a stop off in Havana, Cuba.
Yeah.
How do you jump from studying art at university to going to Cuba to study?
Well, I did very well at university, and I had the opportunity to get a scholarship. Basically, I could pick anywhere because I had very good results. Had different options. I wanted to go to Latin America because it was like the farthest away that I could get from Spain.
You weren't drawn to, say, some of the so-called, in inverted commas, art capitals, art Paris, Milan, New York?
No way.
Why not?
I was really drawn into going to Latin America. So I was looking at Mexico, Brazil, Cuba. That was my target, really. And one of the dean at the time said, Daniel, apply for Cuba because it's just incredible. Won't regret, and this is for you. And I went and applied, and we had just started that bilateral relationship with that university. So it was the second student going there. We had one every year. And
what was the draw of Cuba? I mean, we in the West sit there going, Cuba, communist country. What?
It was the advice from her. You had this idea politically. You got an idea of what that means. Cuba means. Then you get there and you realize that everything is completely different to what you...
Can you elaborate on that? Well, what were your preconceived ideas of Cuba compared to when you were studying there and you'd explored it a bit more? What's the difference that you...
Well, from my ideology at that time, it was like utopic. You think that it's a place where they are struggling economically, but everything is pretty incredible compared to where we live, which is pretty savage, Europe. How everything is developed and the interest and everything is financially drugged. Also, you've got this idea of Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, like iconic people. The second that you get there, you start to realize actually it's a bit controversial when you get told by Cuban people what they actually lived and went through. People that actually believed in the revolution. And after 40 years of revolution, they're in the same shit.
When you take that into account, why do they put so much focus on art, artists, education? And can you elaborate a bit more about that?
They are very, very clever way, and they know what their strength and the socialistic view of the society is. So they are clear that education is the main objective of the revolution was to change education and the impact they had for Cubans. And they were clear that they wanted to provide the best education and preserve their culture.
But why
and
through art?
Because art is your culture. They are very clear that art is the manifestation of who you are as a society. And in art, but also in medicine, they are very clear that education has to be prime. And they spend a lot of money just in educating people, but also the way they approach this is completely different to Europe or America. Here, if you pay, you will study. If you don't pay, you won't study. So it's more financial model to develop your education. Whereas there, they understand that they can afford to have 15 artists a year. In the UK, how many people, or in Spain, or how many degrees?
They'll let as many people who pay the
as long
bill,
as you pay, you
exactly.
will get your degree. Whereas there, it's completely... You can get education as an artist, as a practitioner, as a painter, and you get to a medium level, but then high education, spending 5 years in a university, you need to reach that. So there are loads of exams, and then they select 15 people per year.
So it's a meritocracy, so only the best of the best can
you
go.
need to earn, which is very opposite to my experience in Spain.
So would you say that studying Cuba it's almost... I don't want to belittle art schools here or in Europe, but it's almost like, oh, he's gone to art school. I got it when I studied at photography. It's like, yeah, but you got to come out and get a real job. When you've gone to Cuba,
When I went
only
to
the
Cuba,
15.
When I went to Cuba, it was the moment that I realized that, and I was very serious pre-order. I was very serious with my studies. But I realized that I was becoming a professional artist, and that was not that I realized. I took the position of being a professional artist. That was the difference between what I was doing in Spain and then I did it changed my mentality, how these guys there were working really hard and very passionately and very seriously and going to galleries and going to doing it professionally already. One of the first classes they had there for projects, you need to find, at the end of this course, you need to have an exhibition in Havana. So go and find a gallery with your project and see what you're going to.
In Cuba, are you developing... What's the work that you're producing here? Like, as you say, for example, what's the work that you put into this first exhibition that was one of your first projects when you got there?
When I got there, apart from these practices that was projects, I focused a lot in ceramic. I wanted to learn ceramic. This is something that I've done as a child, obviously, but not really developed. I didn't have the chance to go to a workshop at uni or School of Art. And it's a technique that is actually part of my family from my granddad were ceramicists. And I always that interest in that, but I didn't have the chance to develop it. So when I got there and I could do whatever I wanted, I said, I want to do ceramic. So the first piece that I did was it was a very conceptual piece, but work in ceramic. So I put a series of plates, and each plate was a letter, but it wasn't a letter, it was the sound. I draw manually the graphic of the sound of that letter.
Okay.
So all together, those plates on the wall that normally is decorative, drawing an image. It was just the wall title. It was without title. In translation, it misses a bit of sense. You have to work.
Do it in Spanish.
In Spanish. But it was sin título. That was the name of the piece. And the graphics represented their own link in between both. It was a very naive approach. I was just discovering things and just trying to...
But that's what I'm learning from this journey is that, as I say, you say every project is you need to find a language for every project. And all of this time, it's you developing that creative language, developing that creative practice, going, oh, right, I've always wanted to do ceramics, but haven't had the opportunity. Let's have a go at it. And and having the bravery to go, well, I'm not just a watercolour artist. I'm not just a this.
I've never, in fact, watercolour was only a side until a few years back. That I took it back.
And I was
painting in oil most of the time. And
it's interesting because I've like having done my research and known you for a little bit. I'm going to talk about, people won't understand this without seeing it, but the cardboard boxes that weren't cardboard boxes. It's like all this idea of really pushing that contemporary idea, and you starting to find these elements of you being interested in, say, the bit more of the mundane, the ordinary, and how there's beauty in the ordinary stuff.
There are things that happen there that I didn't realize at the time that I've realized recently. And it's my approach to intentionally, since I was, 21, 22, when I started to create more my own work, I tried to put attention in the ordinary. I didn't want to speak about anything extraordinary or that per se. I wanted to point out things that were there that were completely ordinary.
Well, can I give you one of your own quotes at you? It's, the joy of an artist is to discover the unusual in everyday life. Reflect on the ordinary object like a box, a window, a manhole, rain marks on a wall, little things that speak to our surroundings, finding the unusual in everyday life and the beauty.
And the beauty is very relative. Normally I don't work about, my work is not about beauty in that sense of something that is beautiful.
But that's a subjective
beauty. It's much
entity.
more than that. It's a connection.
So going back to the finding the interest in these ordinary objects, can you talk a little bit on the project of the cardboard boxes? Yeah, and this is going to be something on a podcast is not going to manifest, and we will put some pictures in show notes describe, or whatever.
Basically, my ceramic work ended up being most of the body of my ceramic work ended up being this huge project of 50-something ceramic boxes that look like cardboard, but they weren't. They were ceramic. So all of this actually happened again because of playing with the material. I was learning that material, and I was doing very naive things like those plates that I said. I just wanted to learn the technique. So for that, you need to do all sorts of things, have a go in the game, prepare your own material. A very important key moment here is that I did prepare all my clay. So that's a different approach as well to Spain. In Spain, you go to the shop and get your materials. In Cuba, you prepare your own materials.
Right, okay.
From scratch. One day, as it happened, I was ill and I couldn't go to the workshop. I took some clay to the room to play around, but I didn't have the same materials that I had, the same tools. So I had a piece of cardboard and I prepared my slab over that piece of cardboard. And when I lifted it up, I let it dry. It was literally like cardboard. And I thought, shit, this is incredible what is happening here. That mimic of the material, which is a tiny thing. It's nothing, but it's pretty incredible how it can reproduce
the exact texture of that cardboard.
Texture, it just looks like a piece of cardboard, particularly when red clay is dry. It gets the same color. So it was a mug made out of clay that looked like cardboard, like a tiny box. And it went red. Now the problem is that when you put it in the kiln and becomes ceramic, it doesn't look anything like cardboard anymore because of the color. I thought, anyway, I'll give it a go and I'm going to make a big box. So I made this big box and put it in the kiln, blah, blah, blah.
When you say big box, what sort of size? So you've gone from this mug that looked like
first thing they did was tiny. It was just
tiny. And when you say big, how big was the next box that you made?
But I went for a decent size. It was like 40,
we're on a podcast.
40 centimeters by
wow,
by 60.
Yeah, open lid.
It was open leaves, and it was literally a crazy thing at that moment. And when I put it in the kiln, it came back. And when I opened the kiln, it was smashed, completely smashed. It's a very difficult thing to do. Normally in ceramic, you work with round. How do you say it? Revolution? Cylindrical. That's why the wheel and it.
And I suppose as
every time that you put a corner, it becomes more tricky.
More fragile. Yeah.
So you have to develop quite well what you're gonna do there to sort it out. I carry on with all the stuff, all the projects in there, and I put that aside. When I came back to Spain, I had a scholarship to research in the art department in my university while finishing my personal project. They gave me my own studio. And in that studio, I said, okay, I've learned ceramics a little bit. And I got a good knowledge of the basics of how this is. And we had a kiln that no one uses in this unit. And I did it and developed this crazy project. There was over a year.
So you're a problem solver then? Because you wanted to... How did you get over these problems of the fragility of the box?
That was the year producing the project.
Wow.
So it was huge research, reading loads and making lots of little attempts and seeing how it developed, and trying to achieve the color of the cardboard, trying to mimic the sellotape. And
so how did that work?
Aspects.
Because for anyone that sees them in the show notes, these are cardboard boxes essentially, down to the labels, down to the, as you said, the sellotape that sits on top of them. So they're not painted?
No, they are not. Right. That's the natural color.
So that's the natural color with the texture.
Of that clay. And on top of that, there is grounded powder ceramic. It's clay that has been fired and grinded out to ceramic that you use normally for sculptures. It distresses the tension that you will have in the piece because some of it is already dry and fired.
But I find it so interesting because, as I say, looking at your work now, the connections are there, but it's such a different project.
Yeah, because every project has their own language. It's not something that comes, that you decide, I'm going to work in this technique, therefore it has to be this. It just happened. When you're working in a discipline, that sparkle, when you're researching, it happens because of an accident or because of more development and mixing things that are there.
And I'm with you. I love that philosophy because I think it's dangerous. I mean, I've done it for 20 years. I identified solely as a photographer and didn't realise that actually there's lots of other creative strings to my bow. And you've spent your whole career, it seems like, making sure you're practicing in different mediums, learning different techniques, understanding that, as you say, that beautiful phrase that every project requires its own language. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's probably people constraining themselves in some way in the artistic and creative way because I'm only a watercolour artist, I'm only a photographer, I'm only a oil painter, I'm only a, And that's the education you've got seems to have been so developed on understanding contemporary practice. You spent a year on this project. How many boxes?
More, because I did this particular project were 49 boxes, but I did more that were in different collections. I was sent into different contexts and stuff. The project itself, 49 clothes for the Emperor, were 40 boxes. And the exhibition, the project was not only the boxes, there were loads of things. There were photography, there were other sculptures, text on the wall that explained the web part, an interview, a fake interview that I did, explaining my view on the thesis.
I can imagine walking into it being very submersive and as I say, contemporary. It sounds like an incredible. And where was this being exhibited? Through the university, or was this part of a gallery?
I got my space in a beautiful gallery next to the old art school to present it to the university as my final project. I did it outside the university and inside the university.
Okay.
When I did it, both of them were different, but they were the same project.
Right.
So the second view that I did in the university, I didn't allow anyone to enter the exhibition. I didn't have any interest in actually going back and show. I already did it in the city. If you want to see it, and most of the people knew that I was working on that project, most of the people went to see this exhibition. Why am I going to repeat the same exhibition a few weeks later inside the university? So I set it up and mixed real cardboard boxes with my boxes, filled the whole room and closed the doors. And only people could see from the bay windows on the front.
That's hilarious. I love it. The rebel in
no,
you.
really. Everyone knew that were ceramic, so they assumed that everything was ceramic, but actually it was a mix.
That's brilliant.
The first one was all ceramic.
I love that.
Everyone could touch it.
Okay, so what happens in this timeline? You've done this crazy contemporary ceramics project with these other media, photography, the interview, the creative rebel. You closed it off and mixed your cardboard boxes with real boxes. So at this point, you're studying, but as we've discussed, it seems like they're very much making you are an artist. It's not that idea of just studying art. So are you selling work? Are you making money? Or is it?
Yeah, I'm already selling work and trying to earn a living from my work. As much as I could, obviously, it was a lot.
But
cheaper and
is your art study funded at this point as well?
It is funded as well. So I got a scholarship by also selling my own work to different collectors and winning awards. Which
I think is great in terms of a mentality thing as well, because like we've discussed, a lot of students are in students and they wouldn't even consider selling work before they'd graduated or whatever, or at least from the graduate show. You guys are in it in the mix going, no, we're artists.
Absolutely. I think that's what I said before. In Cuba, it made me realize my approach had to be, I was an artist. I was studying anymore. I was in this safe environment of the university. My attitude had to be that I was professionally developing my practices and it was already out there. So I was already doing exhibitions and working.
And what sort of work are you selling? Are you selling things like the cardboard box, that contemporary style work?
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. I was selling paintings, previous paintings.
And what do your paintings look like at this point? While you're doing, so you're spending a year working
They
on...
were previous paintings. They were in the work that I was doing. That was before I started doing ceramic.
Yeah,
the disciplines that I get into are so tricky and difficult that you need to focus your 100%.
So you've almost put painting aside,
absolutely,
only to focus on the ceramics, and you're selling old paintings.
And selling my ceramic work,
and selling the ceramic work.
Yeah, to different collectors and museums. A couple of pieces that were in this exhibition are still now in one of the museums in Cuenca. That Antonio Perez, it's the collector.
Yeah,
he bought it, and
amazing.
I want this. And
so what does that do to your mind? That must just elevate your mindset in the sense that, look, I'm selling this work as a student. My contemporary art is selling to galleries, collectors are buying it. That must be...
Yeah, it gives you courage as well and belief that is very important. You need to believe that you can do it and just take it naturally. This is what you are studying for. This is what you want to be. Just be. And
That's
do
so
it.
Interesting.
And work and carry on working. I've always been obsessed with work. A lot of people talk about talent, and I don't believe at all
Hard
in
work
talent.
Beats talent every time, right?
To me, what actually is talent is the capacity to persist in the practice. So if you can persist to do what you are doing and always try to do more and work really hard, that's what is going to give you the ability. What they call talent is technical ability. And technical ability is nothing without that hard work.
Yeah.
And it's achievable. It's not something that is given. It's something that is developed.
And at this point, you're finishing off your final year of university. Is that the case? Or
I was finishing and having this scholarship.
How long have you been studying for at this point? Because obviously with Cuenca, then Havana, and then back to Cuenca.
Art, I've been studying at this point about 8 years, something like that, 8.
But obviously
7 years.
It's ingrained.
Officially having a degree and studying for a degree and the School of Art, and it was 8 years.
But 8 years, I mean, God, how long do doctors train? That's more than doctors and everything. So you've put the time into learning your practice as well as being a selling artist at the same time.
And I was going to carry on. My plan at that point, because I was already researching and I had 2 options. At that point, when I presented that project, I was with a scholarship. We were organizing some symposiums of ceramics in the city. And I was like the guy that was behind helping the doctors and stuff to organize this. And one of the doctors, does it make sense? Doctor in art.
Yeah, professor or professors in art. Is that?
But it's not only professor, it's the doctor. I don't think, the problem is that here and in Germany, there's not such a thing. But we got, when you get the PhD, you are a doctor.
Oh, PhD, a doctor. Yeah. Right, they've all got their PhDs in their art practice.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I meant.
That makes sense.
To make sense altogether.
And we can leave that in because I think it's important to leave that in.
And Ángel Garraza, which is one of the most important ceramists at this level, contemporary practice, in Spain, alongside Enric Mestre. Ángel Garraza is from Bilbao, Enric is from Valencia, and they are like the big boys in contemporary practice.
We can add some links as well to their work to show that.
Check it out, because, their career has been incredible. And Ángel Garraza came to see my exhibition, came to the opening, and said, he offered me to go to do my PhD with him in Bilbao. That was like super exciting that someone like him was telling me come and do it there and under his arm. So it was like the first option for me. But at the same time, I was already thinking of moving on. And I wanted to move on into another thing. And also at that time that I was finishing my studies, I didn't want to stay in Spain. I wanted to go abroad again. I didn't want to have that normal environment where everything becomes again the normal that you.
Well, just hearing your story, mate, I would say you've got that quest for adventure and that idea of, I don't want to quote you again, but that idea of seeing new places with different eyes. I think is an interesting concept.
Anytime that you come to a new place, because of your background, you're already adding something to the place.
But that's quite a big decision. You've got one of the most famous ceramicists in all of Spain asking if you want to go and do your doctorate with you, and there's you restless.
But I put it aside, and I thought, what I need to do now is to learn English. For most of people, learning a second language is, not for English people, but for most of the rest.
Muy difícil, mi amigo, muy difícil.
It's very, I felt frustrated I couldn't speak English. And I thought it was the time to give me also a time of a gap after a very exhausting few years, but also the chance of traveling a little bit more. A friend of mine was already here in the UK, and I came with another one of my friends from uni. We started working. Well, I came first to volunteer, and I was teaching bits of ceramic.
Can I give the timeline again? So what's that, 2015 you came?
That's 2015.
And how does that work as a respected Spanish artist selling your work contemporarily to collectors, exhibiting? And where did you
It was brave.
Where did you come to first?
I came first to. I just took it like naturally. My mom was a bit. Are you sure what you're doing? I say, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I just want to do it.
So where did you move to?
I went first to Hull, volunteering.
This is so random.
We were looking for places to go volunteering because it was very easy to start to adapt. They give you accommodation stuff. You didn't need to find straight away a job or whatever. So we went there, my friend, his girlfriend, and I. And soon I started to run some ceramic workshop there and offer them what I could teach them. That was my work as an artist. It was quite interesting because we were using all the recycled materials that we found in the area to create our own kiln and to fire some pieces, it was quite interesting compared to the normal approach that you would have to learn.
And was this you were doing volunteering, doing the ceramic workshops? Was there any other?
It was at the same time all together.
All at the same time?
Yeah, with the same people. It was like a family of students, more or less my age. And it was very good for me as well because none of them were native. So the English was very affordable for me. And after 2 months, they was brilliant and blah, 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 but we started to get a bit bored and thinking, let's just move on and get a proper job, get some money. It was an opportunity as well to make good money at that point in the UK.
But what are you doing to make your money at this point when you move on?
So when I moved on, I came here. A friend of mine was already in bed. So we came in, looked for a house together and tried to find any sort of work that I could do and learn English. What I could do at that point in a kitchen. And I always loved cooking anyway.
It's a creative thing, but I think it's interesting that you wanted to learn English so much that you were almost willing to take that step back almost in your career where you've selling contemporary art.
But it was clear that it wasn't a step back. It was a step forward. So it was an amazing experience, to be honest. Yeah. And it told me, being in a kitchen and starting to work, I actually engaged with that job that much that I ended up becoming a head chef. After 3 years, I got so into it. I loved it so much. And I was working as a head chef in the last few places that I worked.
It seems like you've got that compulsion a little bit in you, in that once you focus down on something.
I love it, and I go all in.
That's cool,
which is dangerous.
Yeah, of course.
Because that was the problem. I nearly compromised my career to go for another career.
So at this point, you're a head chef. That's the most unsociable hours, unsociable job. Are you creating anything at this point, or are you just sleeping?
I'm creating plates of food, which I love.
Which is creating still, but so far...
But not to the same... I mean, nothing to do with this. And there are levels and levels of kitchen, but a normal commercial kitchen in a normal restaurant is not that creative at all. No. But you learn a lot. You learn a lot about teamwork, how to organize things, how to run people, how to run what could be a massive workshop, really.
Yeah.
Of producing something at a minute, boom, boom, is incredible. But,
okay, so how do we go from the kitchen back to Daniel Lopez, professional artist?
I had a crisis. I crashed. I just basically realized, because it's so unsociable, and I was very aware of what I was doing. So in the back of my head, despite being loving what I was doing, I knew that I was switching my career to a point that it wasn't what I always wanted to do and what I was doing previously. Here, everything felt like the normal. But when I went back to visit my family, to visit people in Spain and blah, blah, and they said, well, why are you producing now? I said, I'm fucking not producing anything. Because I'm working in a kitchen. It was so frustrating.
And that must do something to your ego.
I was like, not to my ego as in...
When I say ego, it's that sense of self-worth, our identity.
I thought that
we do that as creatives.
Failing, in a way. Failing to expectations from the other people as well.
Okay.
They expected me to be who I was, not who I was becoming.
But also clearly from your own expectations, because you're feeling it now
Absolutely.
And
every time that I stopped to think, I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? But then you get in this, you earn your living from there. It's your day job. And it's very difficult to leave something that's giving you your food and your money and your bills.
So how was there a moment?
It was a moment that...
Can you talk more?
I went on holiday to Spain. Me, my partner, our daughter. Her granddad died. We were in Spain, and that week was really, really intense emotionally for her, obviously, but for me as well, because this man was an incredible, really inspiring. And I had in my head words that he said, and it was really inspiring. Just the type of person that he was, how he achieved who he was in life from being nowhere as a kid.
Did you recognize that similar drive in yourself?
I suppose that I recognize some similar drive.
And do you think potentially when he passed away, that drive that you recognized in yourself, you could see you weren't fulfilling your...
I felt that I was failing to... I recognized it was his message as well. So I had a massive collapse with myself. After I got back from the holidays and it was coming the funeral, I had a discussion with the owner of the place that I was working at that point. And I said, fuck off, I'm not doing this anymore.
Wow.
Left the place. The day straight after the funeral. Basically, he nearly didn't allow me to go to the funeral in London. And it was like, this is not negotiable. I'm
the
going
straw
to
that broke the camel's back. It's like that's.
And the day after, I got to the rest 8 in the morning after traveling from London. The day before that, we got here at 1:30. Exhausted emotionally and physically. Called him. They left the restaurant in the shit the previous night. The owner cannot run his place in a decent manner. I'm just not doing this shit anymore. Fuck it. And I woke up.
Wow. What do you do at that point when you've essentially put your security to, you've gone, well, fuck it?
I had savings because I was working. And at that moment, I started to consider other options.
Yeah.
So the second I stopped, I was just looking for another job. But then I realized, do I want to go back into this, or shall I take it as a chance to switch completely to myself, to who I am and to what I do? The problem there is that I was completely out of context because what I did, what I had done, who I was, wasn't who I were here. I was another person here. I was a chef.
Of course.
People were shocked to say, no, I'm an artist.
No,
I'm not. I'm actually an artist and this is what I do and blah, blah, blah. So to start from zero here was super tough.
How do you do that? You've clearly got incredible drive. How does that manifest when you've just gone, like you say, I've got some savings, but now what do I do? How do I start from almost ground zero again? Obviously you're not, because you've got that inherent knowledge of being an artist and being the creative. But let's be honest, art is not at the forefront of everyone's minds really in this city. What's the story? How do you start forging your way? What's the process?
Basically, I had the time to start working again in my own practice. I started having the time to paint again and to start doing it as I always did.
How did that feel after so many years?
It was weird. It was weird. Insecurities,
Did you feel like almost, that imposter syndrome kick in?
No, because I knew that it wasn't. I knew who I...
Well, you've got the previous evidence, haven't you? But I just think 3 years out from practice of such.
It took lots of courage and work to get back into the confidence of, realizing who you are and finding again you in another space, in another place, completely different person to who you were. And that's the difficulty. How do you find again, how you drive your creativity into who you are again when you have been disconnected?
And is this where you start to develop the style? Because, you've also said about Birmingham, you love the drama of this city.
Yeah.
And obviously an artist from sunny Spain where, shall we say, weather conditions aren't quite the same. Is this city quite indicative of you developing the style that you're currently practicing? Is that the right way to say it? How much influence has Birmingham had on the current style of your work?
Massively. The city has changed the way I work. Obviously, you change, your work changed. My work changed drastically in the process, but at first, it was just, I'm going to start painting again. And naturally, it happened. I started doing all sorts of things. But then I started doing started a project. In a naive manner, probably at the beginning, I was thinking, there's something that actually is incredible in this city, and it's the capacity to renew itself constantly. I never seen how a city that is growing so fast and buildings that are incredible out there, and suddenly they are demolished and there's a massive tower coming up. And that contrast, the eclectic view of the city was just incredible. But actually the fact that I couldn't take a picture one day and the day after would be the same.
Okay.
It was changing that fast that every day the landscape and the cityscape was changing. So I started this project painting Birmingham in permanent reconstruction. Because if I went to paint the same painting 20 times, it would be completely different.
Yeah.
Not because of the light, because of the actual skyline. And that moved on into other projects. That developed. It's not that I moved on. I started working in acrylic, but then I went and started working again in something that I always loved, that was watercolour. And that allowed me to develop that media, allowed me to develop another level to that practice. That we started playing with the rain. That happened actually because of an accident. Again, it's always the accident
Okay, for those who don't know, can you elaborate? I mean, when you look at Daniel's style of work, you'll perhaps see this, but can you elaborate on that accident that you're having and how that developed your style, your technique, and the vision of Birmingham that you see that comes across in your images, essentially?
Yeah, it happened. Basically, I'm in the shed at home working. That was my first space that I could afford there to be working in. Then I moved to the studio and stuff, but I was there just painting and playing around again with my materials, working and hanging all the pieces because I didn't have that much space inside. I hang it on the washing line outside. And when it started raining, I thought, okay, just leave it there because there's nothing to do now. It's just washing off my painting. And when I went back to the painting that I had put outside, I just started to see this pattern, and the rain had started to move my paint, and it became something else that it wasn't my painting, but it was our painting. It was a Daniel Lopez with the rain painting.
Which is wicked.
And it was incredible.
What sort of style? I mean, what about
those exercises were very abstract and that's why it worked, because they were very gestural works on paper that were produced like in 1 minute, 2 minutes, and put it outside. It's still wet and hasn't dried. So it was the painting was erasing my painting. I was thinking of Rauschenberg erasing a de Kooning drawing. It's a conceptual piece from Robert Rauschenberg that he took at de Kooning. De Kooning was the prominent artist in the 50s in America, and he took one of his drawings that were really crazy blacks on paper. He was only a student, and de Kooning was the most established artist in America. So, can I have this work? I want to do something with it. Took it and erased the whole drawing, becoming a blank paper again. And all of that was coming into my head because of the similarities of what's happening there. I just painted something on the rain.
So how did you move from that idea from getting the rain to work?
Well, I started to think of the movement that was happening there and how gravity and the water started to move. So I introduced it onto my work. This water in watercolor, obviously. You spray water in certain areas to control the humidity of the paper. What you don't normally do is to overflow with water a painting that everything started to run down. What I did, at that point I was already getting very close to facades and details of the wall. And what was happening in my abstract paintings, I realized that it was happening on the walls. Rain falls onto the wall and I start to leave all these marks of gravity and water running down. So I introduced that into my watercolors of facades. And in the process of painting, keep throwing water to delete my painting and to run down the pigment vertically, as it would happen in architecture.
And again, that speaks to you finding the beauty in the ordinary. Most people walk past these buildings, miss these eroded rain, paint stained things, but you
not only on that, but also in finding the beauty in the process, the truth in the process, using the mechanisms that are there, that are doing something to produce in your work some sort of truth. Wine painting is not an illusion. Wine painting is what happens in real life.
Yeah, and that's that.
It has to be truthful.
It has to be truthful, and I think you can see that the techniques that you use to mimic that distress, the layers, like you say, overflowing the water on the piece to mimic those situations. It's
but I'm not mimicking. That's the point. That I'm not actually mimicking that distress. Is happening on the paper.
Sorry, my
that's what I mean. Words, sometimes painting is particularly most of the work that I work. There's some abstract work that is not representing anything; it's presenting itself. But my more representative work has to present itself. You're not painting a photograph. There's no point at all for me into trying to reproduce a photograph that is already there. Our job is translating other things, not only the image, all the things into a painting. You're using your own language, which in watercolor is something particular. In oil, they are both bidimensional. and there is color, but it's nothing more than that in similarities. The language, for me, is very similar because it's my understanding of how to represent or construct an image in terms of composition, but the actual nature of the medium is very different. So you need to use it as well. You need to highlight what the medium is talking about to express more of where you want to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've developed this style, this technique, this collaboration with the elements. Is that more of a way of talking about it?
Yeah, I would say.
And would you say that's, I don't want to say your current visual language, but because I know that's ever changing with you, but it feels like that's very much the area that seems to be working or that you're throwing yourself into at the moment. And is that specifically because you're in Birmingham and that's the market? Is there a market for people seeing scenes of Birmingham? And
there's a market luckily for my work. And I don't know if it's because of being Birmingham. In fact, I'm selling a lot of work as well that is more of Spain. In another way, I'm working also with Spain, and the work that I produce is not with the rain. Let's say it's more with the sunlight and how to paint the texture, focusing on facets of my town, not my town, but my area, my zone in Spain. These hard shadows and trying
you've
to
got
paint
that serious contrast, really, haven't you? You've got the hard warmth of the Spanish sun versus the almost grey flat light sometimes and rain, essentially.
You work with what you have and what is there. So
what does that process look like for you? Do you take reference pictures?
I do all sorts of things. Sometimes a painting can be completely from imagination. I just create my own place or my own composition of things. And sometimes I got loads of photography from different places. I keep taking pictures of everywhere as a reference. But then I sit down with my notebook and take notes. And at the end of the day, wherever a photograph is or not, even if I work with a reference photograph, I never paint what is on the photograph.
Yeah, it's got to be your interpretation.
It's complete. I mean, it's very similar sometimes. Some of my work is very photographic in a sense, particularly in black and white watercolor. But I think it's because there's a clever use of the technique as well and the medium, and that monochrome aspect is always going to remain of photography, all photography, where everything is a bit blurry.
It's a perception of an image, really, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, and the attachment, the relationship that we establish with the image more than... I think that perception is very personal it's the relationship of the spectator with the image rather than
of course
whatever you are doing in it.
In Birmingham, you've already said I love the drama of the city, and we are a very industrial city in parts. It feels there's an element of grittiness about this city mixed with the shiny glossiness at the same time.
Yeah.
And I can see that very much in your work. But I'm also wondering, how, more on a practical side, I can see the style and how the interest, and you said that your uncle was an architect or is an architect, so I can see that interest in the facades of the buildings and all those sorts of things. But can I sort of address something a bit more practical? How do you go from your shed, essentially, using up your savings, getting back into your practice, to having your own studio, to be back being a full-time artist? I know this is a bit boring, a bit like the business behind it, but I think people listening are going to be like, well, you've
just taking the risk, really. The risk at the time that you can take it, because I soon started selling again work here, and there was.
But to who? Who's your clientele in a city that doesn't know you as an artist?
With people that and then I started to work with different galleries, Instagram and markets. Markets were very good opportunity to get back into some commercial aspect. And open studios as well. Open studios, the first one that I did was a great opportunity for me. And just getting known in the city. People see your work, they like it, they think... So
you're selling privately, publicly at art markets and things like that? At this point, are you working with any of the galleries in Birmingham?
No,
or are you still...
Not at the beginning, and then soon I started to work with galleries and spaces that wanted to sell my work. At first, even shops, wherever. Then a couple of galleries approached me and they started selling my work. So before I moved to my studio, I'm already working with one of them, and then soon another one.
Can I give your galleries a shout out?
I'm working now with Seven Circle, which is a new place in Mosley. They are doing a fantastic job, and we together are doing a great job as well, because there's a huge lack in the city of spaces, independent spaces for artists to sell their work, and also to represent what is happening in the city, that there's a lot going on, very underground, and there's great stuff.
So you're in Birmingham, you're working out of your shed at this point, you're creating work, developing your practice again.
But also to earn money doing anything, little jobs, but nothing that actually compromise, again, my time to be full-time dedicated to other things. I knew that my main practice had to be back to art.
I think that's important for people to understand, isn't it? You're trying to build your way as an artist. It's okay to do those other jobs to earn money, because we've all got to live.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm quite handy, so I did all sorts of things, from decorating to building things to whatever was needed.
But your discipline meant that it was, as long as it didn't negate the practice of creating, you had to earn
as
money.
Much as I could do both at the same time, it was fine. What I didn't want was get stuck in a full-time job. And having a day job is a very risky thing, because it gives you safety, a sense of safety, but also demands all your attention. So it strangles your desire to do any other thing, because you're compromising all your time to that thing, because you're safe. I mean, when you got a day job and it's normal income, you end up normally spending all that, whereas actually a lot of you can cut down most of the expenses and focus and say, okay, I don't need that much.
You just got to weigh your priorities, right?
Weigh your priorities and what do you need to not compromise all your time, so you can have more time to produce or to do.
But we'll have the naysayers say, oh, well, it's easy for you because of this, or it's easy for you because of that. But clearly from the story, you've sacrificed a lot to maintain that drive towards being a full-time artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously I had support. My mum has been a great support. My partner is a great support as well in many aspects, when you are low and when you are thinking or doubting or anything.
You need someone to believe in you and have your back.
Yeah, and at first here, I can tell you that it was super difficult, because it was shocking for most of people. They say, no, I'm actually an artist. When you're a chef.
Yeah, you like we said previously, essentially you've had to start that whole perception of who you are to the people around you.
To other people, and it's difficult to get that to people that already got a preconception of who you are.
So how do you get to that? Because that seems like professionally almost a step back in terms of the level that you're working at, but you're now becoming a known artist in Birmingham, presumably, and people are buying your work. When are you sort of thinking, oh, maybe I can really afford to do this full time, I can get my own studio, where does that financial stability come in?
Financial stability is never there. It's never there. It's a continuous struggle. You are more safe or less, but it's always a struggle. There are months where you are selling loads, and then that there will be months where you're not selling anything because nothing is happening, or because of the time of the year as well, that it fluctuates. But I just took the risk. An opportunity came up and I took it. I took the risk, and it was a lot of money for me to pay for a studio, but it gave me more visibility, and everything started to grow more because of being on that studio and organizing things. And it just professionalizes your practice a little more and gives this projection to other people to see you in a more professional way. Everything is a learning process, as an artist, and dealing with galleries, dealing with every single aspect of the profession, selling on your own as well, your website, what prices do you...
Yeah, and I know, having had a couple of photographs and exhibitions and things, and they ask you for prices on it, it's very difficult to price your own work, isn't it, in some respects?
It is, but it's not. For me, nowadays, it's very easy. I know perfectly how much each painting is. That's the price they sell this sort of work. I produce a work, and I know, okay, this is much. The time that is in there, and it's not the time or the materials or that, because that is...
No, it's a
percentage of the actual value. but it's all the things that you're doing around within the body. And to run the business and also to get the stability.
Well, it's like anything when you're a solopreneur or a solo creative, you have to be the creative, you have to be the accountant, you have to be the marketeer, you have to be the social media manager, you have to sort of do all of these aspects. Yeah. So like you say, it's always a learning curve. But it's very
not much different to many other trades. It's not in that aspect of running the business. It's not much more different to other trades.
And do you think artists fall down in that sense? And in some respects, there's that, we're all fluffy artists and we haven't got that commercial brain. I know that's a sweeping generalization, but do you think that's an integral point of making? I mean, I understand it a bit more coming from a commercial background. It's that, you could be the greatest artist, but if people aren't buying your work, if you're not selling it, how do you sustain? So you've got to have that business mentality.
Depends on you, and the sort of work that you want to produce.
Yeah, I understand that. So if every project requires its own language, what would you say right now, as we record this, what's the language you're speaking?
At the moment, my medium, which is crucial part of the language, is watercolor. I'm working mainly with watercolor, but being very savage to the medium. I think my approach to it is very brave, in a sense.
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Brave in a sense that the way I produce the work is savage sometimes, and not caring about the limits, not caring, in fact, pushing all the limits that I can, and I still produce a work that is interesting visually. Because if you are very savage, sometimes it can go very wrong and be absolutely shit, just a mess. But to control in a medium that doesn't forgive you, to be brave, to push it, and still create an image that works.
Do you ever have a problem knowing when to, I know you say it's savage, knowing when to stop a piece, knowing when to go, I've done too much on this, or...
And it happens with watercolor a lot.
Yeah,
you cannot overwork. You need to know very well the limits, and know as well when to stop. But
you've grown up mixing your own paints, your own mediums, so that's given you that inherent knowledge of the stuff you're working in, right?
Yeah, and intuition. Sometimes it's intuitive. You just know. You can carry on working on the same painting for years. I don't spend more than 2 days because it has to be an explosion sort of thing where everything that is in there, I want to be interconnected.
There's an energy to it, right?
There's an energy that has to be translated and happen there. And particularly watercolor is super fast. When I say 2 days, I mean 2 sessions. I wait normally overnight for drying times so I can do a second session on it. And in between every single element that goes into the painting that is interconnected, if you look at the work, every single brush stroke is interconnected. And that's what I'm looking for in the language. Every sign, at the end of the day, a brush stroke is like a word that describes something. And I want all the words to be connected and have a pause. Like if you're writing, have a pause, have a full stop, but still everything is in one whole thing, in harmony.
If you could summarize the thing that connects your work together, how would you put that in a sentence?
I think it's always my approach to that. It's the way, it's the method. It's not the result, it's not the medium, because I work with these mediums. It's the method, the methodology that I follow when I'm producing, and to be open.
And what is that thing that ties the methodology, whatever the medium is, together?
Regarding what I work with, the elements I work with, is always the ordinary, something that no one looks at normally. Whatever medium I'm using, I'm always looking for the sort of limits of itself. Where are the connections with the other limit? How do I approach every single discipline? Because I've worked with different ones. It's always by contrast. This medium is this because it's not the other one. It's like putting it in boxes again. Where is each discipline? And trying to go to the border where the connections are and find their own identity. What makes this what it is? In watercolor, for instance, what makes watercolor be watercolor and be so great? In technical aspects and not that technical aspects. You know, the nature of the paper, the fact that it's something so natural and that watercolor, in contrast to every other medium, allows you to see the particles, the pigment on the paper. You don't see, it's not a lump of paint. It's actually bits of pigment on the paper that you can perfectly see. That's what makes watercolor to me. To be able to see the paper, to be able to feel that natural cotton.
Okay. Well, I think, we've definitely developed your story. I think my next question for you then off the back of that is, do you see your next pause coming up? And if so, what do you think the next project, is there any projects where you're thinking, oh, now's the time to maybe move away from watercolor, have that pause, that full stop and go, now I want to do this? Or
probably. And in fact, I've been doing other works recently, like murals and commissions that took me away from the studio, and personal reasons that took me away for a while from the studio and working in other aspects of it.
Sorry, can you talk a little bit more on that? Because I think that goes again to the fact that you're obviously a talented artist. You're doing these mural commissions again as a means of paying bills alongside selling, alongside
absolutely.
exhibiting.
And it's also about, at least it's connected with the work.
Yeah,
I'm painting and I'm producing and I'm creating. It's not my personal work, it's a commission. But if someone comes to you and say, I want your work to be on my wall and adapted to this concept, sweet.
Yeah, great.
It's fantastic. I take commissions as well for normal paintings that will go on your wall.
Yeah,
why wouldn't I do it on a
of
on
course.
a wall? So, and it's a fantastic, actually, they are great experiences working with these commercial spaces like restaurants. It's absolutely great. The only problem is that when you are involved in those sort of projects, some of them longer, it takes you away from the normal routine of the studio, where you are immersed in yourself and you're not working for anyone else. Yeah.
So what are the goals and aspirations moving forward for Daniel Lopez for the next? Do you have any?
Well, I got this project that I'm doing, Thinking the City in a Box. We just started like a year and a bit ago. It's an ongoing project. I want to work in the 3 cities that I lived in the most. It's Havana, Cuenca, and Birmingham. Not that I lived the most actually in time, but that had more impact in me.
Yeah.
What they gave me.
And can you tell us a little bit more? What is the project Thinking the City?
Thinking the City in a Box is a collection of paintings that I present like a collection of limited edition prints in an original box. It's a view or a thought of the city. So it started in black and white in Birmingham, then I did the black and white in Cuenca. I want to start the black and white in Havana, and the second edition that I've already done in Birmingham, it brings a hint of color, always working on the skin of the city. So it's not a view separate, it's very close to the wall. These textures that we are talking about, and this reflection on the surface of what is happening to this architecture, and manifesting the extraordinary of those ordinary spots.
Yeah.
That we can see that actually reflect every architecture. There is something, some movement there, that you build something and it's not from the place. It feels external, it feels strange, until it becomes part of the landscape. The marks from everything, the rain, but the text, the people living in, the windows. My approach now, if you see this work that I got behind, is only recent, and I'm now going through the windows of the architecture, taking scenes of the ordinary. This is a butcher.
Yeah.
And it's through the window of the shop. So I'm looking inside. This probably will be the next step. I don't know. I'm just playing around.
But that seems to have done you well in the past. All your playing and creating.
You need to play. You need to be open to play and not to be.
Seems like a good...
reproducing the same thing constantly. Yeah. There's no point for me to reproduce.
Seems like a good place for me to. Have you got any tips for artists or creatives? I know that's a very broad, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of people listening to this, hearing your story, who have got inspiration from it for sure. But I mean, you talk a lot about bravery, and I can see that in your adaptability and your ability to just change your path without much resistance, it seems. What do you have any tips for creatives?
And adaptability as well. At the end of the day, you adapt to what you got. When I got to this city and I had voice there, I started to work with it. You need to adapt and just move on. But move on being very attentive to what is happening. What I would say for any creative, is to allow themselves to play consciously. Take it as a game. So you do something that is a game and observe what is happening.
Yeah.
And take notes of what is happening.
I
And move on
great.
from
I think that's great advice. I think
what
as
is happening.
creatives, sometimes we can be too restricted in
Normally happens.
a medium, in a way of working, and that play.
Particularly when you're not confident in the medium. That shows that you're not confident in the medium because you have to focus in the medium itself. You feel confident and brave. You say, okay, I got this.
And you can
I'm
start
in control.
deconstructing that medium.
I'm in control of what is happening. I can start to play around.
Yeah.
But for that, you need to achieve confidence. That comes because of loads of repetition and work behind that. Then you achieve the moment when you say, okay, I'm going to tweak here and take the note of what is happening. Oh, this is happening. And then you go to bed and wake up at 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning, thinking, I got it. And you need to go to the workshop and carry on working on what you were before. That's the creative process.
Yeah.
To me, when you aim that, that's the sweet spot. When you wake up in the night thinking of what you were doing the day before and everything in your head is starting to give you the next move.
Mate.
And for that, you need to play.
Well, that's great advice. Dude, I think this has been brilliant. I've got a little bit of a tradition that I like to sort of try and end things on. Do you have any sort of quote or motivational statement that you can, it can be your own, it can be someone famous that is sort of just helped you? As I say, we like to end on a bit of a positive.
It comes to the saying that I just said in a concept. But it's this approach to creativity. And David Bowie said, I don't remember exactly the words, but when you are playing in the water and you feel safe, you're not playing in the right place. You need to go a bit deeper, just about when you don't feel the flow. And then is when things can happen, which is always just leaving the comfort space. That's what I would say. Leave your comfort space and open up to the possibility of another thing. Yeah. Which is, for me, leaving that comfort space has been a routine, really. Moving to another city, moving to another discipline, moving into another project, even if the other project was still, could have more. Yeah. But do I carry on doing the same thing and it becomes
your comfort zones will kill you.
Become a ceramist, being 24, 25? No, I don't want to become a ceramist. And this, but one of my professors, which I really appreciate and love a lot and respect, Armando Montesinos, we had many chats at this time in my life. Many chats. He was there for me and we were talking a lot. And when I was doing this project, and when I presented it, he went like, this is extraordinary, Daniel. Now you need to think, do you want to be a ceramist? Or who do you want? What sort of artist do you want to be? Do you want to be a professional on this discipline or the other? Or do you want to be an amateur in all of them? And I realized that I wanted to be an amateur, and it's not an amateur. It's the one that has got the ability to switch from one to another and play with it. Play with it. That's the key thing. Play with it.
Yeah, mate, that's fantastic. Well, it goes to this as well. I mean, I've spent 20 years in the commercial photography industry and now I'm recording a podcast. So
there you go.
Who knows? Great, dude. This has been fantastic. The other closing thing that I do like our guests to do is, if we can, is like the spider reach of the Creative Nowhere Land podcast is, can you recommend someone in your network that might be interesting for us to have a chat with on the podcast?
Absolutely. I got quite a few. So to select one.
Top one.
I'll select another interesting journey is Boxy Trixie.
Okay.
He's Argentina. And we moved from working hand on hand in the other studio. He's upstairs. And he would probably love to...
Oh, wow. And so what's his name again, sorry?
Boxy.
And he's an Argentinian artist based in Birmingham.
His work is completely different to mine.
Great.
Absolutely different, and a different approach, a different experience. He does lots of street art and printmaking. Very It's a very primitive South American style. Primitive.
Well, that's fantastic. Well,
You'll love it.
hopefully we can arrange that moving forward. Daniel Lopez, I just want to say, gracias, hombre. It's been very interesting talking to you. I know we've been friends for a while, but getting to the grips of your journey, I think is very interesting. And I think there's so much for people to take away from this. So just once again, thanks very much for taking the time to do it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and for having the time to have a chat with me and to find it interesting as well.
Dude, you're a legend. And I'm going to leave all of Daniel's links somewhere in the show notes, and just make sure you check him out. There's some amazing stuff going on his social media where you can see much more of Daniel's process. Yeah, I recommend you all check him out. Thanks, bro.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Noah Land podcast. If you found anything inspiring or useful in this episode, please consider subscribing or maybe sharing the episode with a friend. Anything you can do to help promote and support Creative Noah Land is so beneficial, and I really appreciate it. Check out the website and sign up to the newsletter to be the first to know of everything that's going on here in Creative Noah Land. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, explore, inspire, and create.
Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way. And so, therefore, it's so important to consider this question: what do I desire?